You're listening to LVB Podcast Show with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hello and welcome to LVB Show. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. Before I introduce our guest, I want to say, like always, thank you so much to everyone listening from the United States, from Canada. We have listeners in Africa, in Latin America, in Australia, in Europe, and even in other countries and continents. So thank you for listening to the show. Remember, you can find all these interviews, especially the latest ones, if you go to my YouTube channel. And there's going to be a link to the channel when I post this interview. Okay, so tonight we have John Bramblitt. John Bramblitt, I found out about him during the Disability Unite Festival. It was to mark the 30th anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. I was happy to participate in terms of making sure my friends would sign up to participate in this wonderful event. And hundreds of them did, so I'm very grateful to them. And John, he's going to tell us why he was participating in this very special event. And I found him to be a very interesting character because he's a blind person who is a very famous artist, to be honest with you. And he has been featured on the New York Times, NBC, ABS, CBS, BBC, etc., etc., etc. And in my view, that's one of the examples we need to follow as people who have a disability, in this case, a visual impairment like me. So, John, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for making the time to be here with us.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here.
The pleasure is all mine, my friend. And let me begin by asking you, what was that participation at the Disability Unite Festival like for you, and what did you do? Tell our listeners who don't know.
Oh, it was interesting because most of the time, you're there in person, but because of the current unpleasantness, let's say, that's going around the world,
yeah.
Everything has been more, it's online, it's virtual. So I was doing a painting for them. It was different in a way because I'm usually there in person and I get to talk to people, and it's so much fun because I get to share stories with everyone, and I get motivated and inspired by all the people that I meet. But instead, I was here in my studio, which is just outside of Dallas, Texas, in the U.S. And so I was here, and I was painting here in the studio. But it was such an incredible event, though, and it was so interesting. It was so great to be here in the studio and hear all the other things that were going on, all the other stories that were being told. I felt so connected, even though I hadn't left the house, I was still here in the studio, to hear all these amazing stories and all the stuff that was going on, and to celebrate 30 years of the ADA. It's just incredible. But I was doing a painting, here live, and they would come back and they would check in on me, say, "Hey, how's the painting going?" And I would say, "Well, it's a going." But it was interesting. What did you think about the experience?
Well, John, and for our listeners, I used to work for RB On Site in New York, and I was honored, to be honest with you, John, and for our listeners, to participate at the first ever Disability Pride Parade when it was in New York City. And the experience is unbelievable. And I do agree with you, John. It's it was strange at the beginning to understand it was going to be a virtual experience. But it was wonderful because the bond is the same, the feeling is great, and the connection with everybody, regardless of their disability, regardless where they live, what is their story, we are all connected. and we understand each other so well. And so I felt it was a wonderful experience and feeling and a moment of being even prouder than ever of what we are able to bring to the table on this planet. Yeah, we are going through a lot right now with this pandemic, but I also believe we have been able to reflect in our lives what we want, what we need, what we deserve, and build on those. So
That's
I always see the
wonderful.
positive. I always see the positive.
I love everything you just said.
Well, you're very kind, John. And John, our listeners are eager to find out about you. And the first question I have is, what's the cause of your blindness?
Oh, I was born with epilepsy, and as I got older, it developed into very severe epilepsy, and then whenever, gosh, I was probably 12 or 13 or so. We're not sure exactly when, but I ended up getting Lyme's disease, and that affects your neurological systems and stuff, and it went undiagnosed for years because my neurologists weren't looking for anything other than the epilepsy. I had enough, and I had kidney problems. I had to have a kidney removed, had all this other stuff going on. So they weren't looking for anything new. But then I guess because of the Lyme disease, and finally when they found it, maybe the treatment of that and the treatment for the seizures, the antispasmodics and stuff, they can actually cause seizures as well. And they're always trying these different cocktails to get my seizures under control. But I started to have seizures that I wasn't coming out of, and it would actually make my breathing stop. It would make my heart stop. And that's really bad for your brain, apparently. You need air going to your brain, oxygen. So I started having these terrible seizures, and it was causing damage to the occipital lobe in your brain, and that's the part of your brain that handles vision. So, and I was in college when this was happening, and so I would just have these massive seizures. They said it was like getting hit in the back of the head over and over again, like with a baseball bat. And every time I would have one of these massive seizures, and it left it where my eyes are fine, but it left it where it's almost like if you think of a TV. But you've disconnected the antenna or the cable or whatever it is, the signal coming in. So my eyes were fine, but the part of my brain, that actually handles the vision didn't work anymore. So it was like a TV with the cable disconnected. My eyes worked, but there wasn't an image getting through. And so I have light perception. I can tell that there's light out there. And my brain knows there's light, but it can't do anything with it. It doesn't make shadow, it doesn't make color, it doesn't make any of this sort of stuff. So I hope I explained that okay. I don't.
Yes.
Oh, good.
I have to say, John, that scientists are working on developing ways of regaining sight on people who have their optic nerve damage, and other things, because there are so many kinds of blindness, so many causes of blindness. And so there are so many things going on right now about that. I wonder something, John, before I continue with things that I have planned to ask you. And is, you have been blind for so long. If a cure comes out, would you be happy or would you be a little bit scared of that?
I would be happy. I don't think about being blind. It's funny, it's been so long, and losing my eyesight was probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through. I'm sure it was, actually. But once you adapt, in the amazing tools that we have out there, the amazing adaptations, the technology, the different skills, once you learn how to adapt, then you've adapted, and it's not as much of a pull, at least for me. And I know it's different for everyone, but it's not something that I think about every day. But, anything that you can make your experience in life better, I'm all for. If I could get super hearing, I would go for it. If I could if I could get my vision back, I certainly would. If I could get X-ray vision, like Superman, I would do that too. Just anything to add to the human experience, to add to our senses. But if it meant that I for some reason, like, if they invented a time machine and I could go back, and never have lost my eyesight, but that meant that I had to lose all of the lessons that I've learned, everything, this journey that I've taken. I wouldn't have that anymore. I wouldn't have all the, all the emotions, all the feelings, all the ideas that I've had over the last 20 years. I wouldn't do that. It wouldn't even be a hard, it wouldn't be a hard decision. But if they came out with something now and they said, oh, we can fix your optic nerve and you'll have vision again, I would definitely go for it, because I don't really, vision doesn't define me anymore. It doesn't, if I don't have vision, I can live a very happy, extremely fulfilled life. I'm happier now than I've ever been in my life, sighted or not. But I would definitely, I've never seen, like, I can touch and see. Like, I've practiced over 20 years to be able to touch and understand what I'm touching in a visual sort of way because, that's the way that I paint. But, like, I've never actually used my eyes and seen my son's face or my wife's face for that matter. I know what they look like. But, it'd be interesting to actually see the sunlight reflect off their skin, and to see their face. But so I would definitely do that. Sorry for the long answer. I don't know. That's not something I think about. You've taken me down a rabbit hole.
That's okay. That's a very, very good answer, actually, because I have to agree with you. I wouldn't change my past for the world. The toughest times are always the ones that give you lessons. And from everything you learn and you develop more strengths as well. And you are able to help other people as well because you have lived through a lot and you're able to pass that knowledge, information, and skills to others as well. John, during that participation at the Disability Unite Festival, you were saying that at one point when you were hit, if for a lack of a better word, by blindness, you began a tough process, like for everybody happens, one way or the other. What was that like? Like depression or feeling that maybe there was no way out or there was no hope in the future? And I think this subject is important, John, because I have done this podcast for over 9 years now, almost 10 years actually, and this is about the positive side of things, but it's also a real one, and so we want to talk about emotions, feelings, and ways of coping for people. So I want to see the bright side, but I also want to see the dark side and how did you get out of that,
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
Whatever you're able to share with our listeners about the toughest part and then say, you know what, but after that, blah, 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 so people can understand the process.
Well, first thing I want to say is thank you so much for you doing this for 10 years and putting out a positive message out there and also telling the truth. It's not all, I don't want people to hear my voice and how I'm laughing and I'm so happy and think that that's the way it always has been. It's been a journey. And whenever I first lost my eyesight, I thought my life was over. I thought everything good in my life or anything new in my life, I couldn't imagine there being anything new coming in. I was a very visual person. I drew all my life. I think I could draw before I could walk. And then when I lost my eyesight, all that was gone. I couldn't imagine being able to draw. I couldn't imagine being able to travel independently. I was fortunate in that I was a student in college at the time, and the way everything was set up, the college was set up so that if you, in the place where I lived, that if you lost your eyesight, they wanted to try and keep you in university. So I didn't have to go to the school for the blind. I stayed at my school and I started learning all the different things that you have to learn. Like Braille, how to be able to, sew on a button without sticking yourself with a needle too many times, how to eat without getting food all over yourself most of the time, how to cook, just how to redo everything. And I was an English major at the time. But I suddenly couldn't read or write anymore. You know, I was a college student that couldn't read or write. It was ridiculous. So I was having to learn how to use screen readers, you know, the technology to be able to use computers to be able to read and write. I was also learning Braille, O&M, or orientation and mobility training, which is the training with a white cane, you know, to be able to travel independently. But here's the funny thing, though. I was doing all of this very positive sort of things. I was doing everything right, but on the inside, though, I was still, it didn't help anything. You know, I mean, I was thinking, I was still extremely angry. I was so depressed. And even though I was learning all of these different things and I was doing everything that I was supposed to, and I was still going to college, I was getting incompletes. I wasn't able to write the papers or anything, but I would have a guide take me to classes, and I would basically just sit there, and then I would make up the classes later on, but I was just, I did not see a future. You know, if I did the math in my head and I didn't see an outcome, I didn't see a way for anything to ever change in the future. And the reason that I thought that, of course, was because I was extremely depressed and I was extremely angry. I didn't even realize how angry I was. And I was so fortunate, though, and a lot of people don't have what I had then. And even though I didn't believe in myself at all, I had people around me that did believe in me. I had people at my university. I had people that had disabilities, and they had worked through it. And they told me, they said, John, you can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. You know, there's a future out there. And I thought they were so nice to lie to me just to make me feel better. I didn't believe them at all. But I kept trying to do what they said. And of course they weren't lying. But it was not easy. But that's one thing that I think art really helped me, because when it comes to art, you're only focused on what you can do. Like if I'm working on a painting, if I'm working on a way to draw that I can touch and feel, it doesn't matter what you can't do. It doesn't even enter into the equation. It's all about what you can do. And at the time, I was so angry and I was so depressed. I didn't see how anything new or different could be in my life, anything good. But when you focus on creating something every day and you get a little bit better at it, maybe it's just the tiniest bit better, and you do that every day, with the artwork, maybe the painting is just the tiniest bit better. You're able to make a line where the day before it you couldn't, then that starts to build up and you start to realize, you can make a difference in your life, even if it's just small. And you start to focus on that, and that gives you hope. And I think that's the thing that I lost the most whenever my eyesight went, was that I just lost hope, and I didn't realize that hope was so important. I mean, because I always had it in my life, you always think that, well, today may be bad, but tomorrow might be better, or maybe, there's a future. And I didn't realize what a physical presence the hope was in your life until I lost it. And then artwork was my way of getting that back.
By listening to you say this, it reminds me of something that happened. I was just talking to someone here in Colombia. We're talking about probably back in 2011 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that person said, boy, you are an optimistic person. You have a lot of good vibe to you. Are you aware of that? And I said, I guess. I don't know. And I remember John thinking, okay, I'm legally blind, but I have many abilities, many skills like anybody else. And I suppose that started changing my life, understanding that I had something to give to this world, and sometimes people wouldn't tell you, sometimes you couldn't feel it, but sometimes someone has to remind. And I think that began changing my belief in many ways. I also wanted to point out something very interesting that you said, and is you can have many things. You can have an iPhone, you can have maybe a Mac, you can have a white cane, you can have anything in your life going on for you to help you adapt to your new situation. But if inside you are not adapting to your new situation, it's not going to work for you. You probably are going to need some help, some assistance. Maybe you're going to need a therapist. Maybe you're going to need any kind of counseling, and it's fine if you need that. But it's most important to have our brains well than anything else. Because, yes, assistive technology is wonderful, but it's worth nothing if our brains are not going well and if we are emotionally feeling bad. That nothing is going to help us. And I always say that, John, as a disabilities advocate for so many years, I have done conferences, I have done hundreds of interviews. I know what I'm talking about. And I always say that. I always say, in my view, it's a mistake many organizations in the blind community does make in the United States and everywhere. Because many times they say, we are going to give you the tools. We're going to give you the iPhone, or we're going to give you an Android phone, blah, blah, blah. And I always ask them, yes, and the other part? Oh, yeah, the other part is important. No, it's not important. It's essential. Because
yes.
I have known many people that have all the equipment in the world, and they are at home feeling sorry for themselves. They have nothing to go for, nobody's helping them, and they are isolated. And
yes. Oh my goodness.
That's not fair, but that's the way it is. Because technology is wonderful, but it's a tool. Our brains is everything. Because from there we can build anything. I mean, for our listeners and for you, John, I am a big believer in the law of attraction. I think it's a wonderful concept, and it works. And The Secret is a wonderful concept, and it works. I believe me, I know it works. I'm fascinated with the power of the mind. I don't know if you are aware of this, John, and for our listeners, but my favorite basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan, his mindset was studied by the University of North Carolina, and in California they did a study about his mindset and how important it is to visualize what you want to achieve in life. And it worked for him. So it works. So my point is, assistive technology, amazing. But what about how are we feeling in our lives? My dear friends, John, I know I am always talking about this subject. Some people understand what I'm saying, some people don't. But I have proof that what I'm saying is correct. And when we start thinking more about mental health as the number one priority in this planet, we're going to be better as people.
You're so right. Oh my goodness, I cannot agree with you more, because a white cane or a guide dog or a phone or all that, it's just tools in your toolbox, but that's all they are. They're just tools. And I hate to call my guide dog a tool, but she's such a sweetheart. But I mean, it's just, but the training that she has and all that, it's but like the cane, they're just tools. But if you can't use them, if you're not in the right mentality, it's like for a carpenter, you can give somebody all the best tools, but if they don't know how to use it and they're not prepared to use it, then they won't build anything. And one thing that I've noticed, I do a lot of workshops with children, and I'll go around and I work with schools for the blind, and 99% of the workshops I do are with people that don't have a disability, but my favorite ones are with people that do. But it's funny. It's all about the mentality. I mean, that's what it is. It doesn't matter it's all about just believing that you can do something, and giving it a try. And I don't know. I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you, John. And now, you just said something extremely interesting. The workshops that you do, some are for people with disabilities, but you also do some for people who have no disability. So please, let's go into the artist part of this, which is, first of all, how did you discover the power of painting, and how do you paint without seeing?
I started drawing when I was little. I think I could draw before I could walk even. For some reason, that just made sense to my brain. And then growing up, I took every lesson. I read every book that I could on art, and I talked to everybody that I could. And I learned how to do blueprints for houses, how to draw those up, how to do cartoons, portraits, all of that. And then, but then whenever I lost my eyesight, it didn't even occur to me that I could still draw. And it wasn't until I started learning how to use a white cane and how to travel independently, using a white cane, which took about a year for me, that I started thinking, so I lived in an apartment near the university that I went to. And after about a year, I could leave the apartment using my white cane and the skills that I had learned and be able to walk down the streets and find the university, and get in the right building and find the right classroom. And I thought, well, my word, if I can cross a city by using my sense of touch, because really with a cane, you're just using your sense of touch and then some skills, some techniques to be able to, to apply what you're feeling and to be able to know where you are and all that kind of fun stuff. But if I could use my sense of touch to get across a city where there's cars and things that can run into you, surely I could get across something smaller like a canvas if I just use the same techniques, the same ideas. So I started learning how to draw by using my sense of touch. So before when I would draw, I would use pencils and graphite and all these kinds of things, which are great, but you can't feel them. You make a mark on a canvas and it might as well not be a mark because there's nothing there for you to touch and feel. So I started using paint that would dry really fast and it would leave a raised line. So now I could touch the canvas and there's actually something to feel there. And if you're a sighted artist, you really only use your eyes for a couple of things. You use your eyes to know where you are on the canvas and you use your eyes to know where you've been on the canvas. Now, if you're a person who is visually impaired, you use your sense of touch to know that. If you're in a room, you can feel around, you can feel like where the couch is or the wall and you know where you are. You can spatially orient yourself to that space, but you can also know where you've been. You can feel around, you can feel like, the steps that you just took, you can feel behind you. And using a cane, you can reach out. So if you're visually impaired, you use your sense of touch to basically do what your eyes do. So I just started using that. So I'm using cane techniques on my painting, which I love because it means that anybody can learn how to paint the way I do. If you're visually impaired, what I do is not special. It's not unique. Anybody can learn how to do it. And it's not like you have to go out and buy expensive equipment or anything either. It's just about techniques. It's just about learning. So it's just about, somebody will teach you the techniques, then you've got it for life and you can teach someone else. All the workshops that I do, I've worked in museums all over the place. They're always free. I never charge for a workshop. But basically it's just being able to get around on the canvas. And when I first started, it was very, very simple. I was trying to draw things like squares and circles. When I was sighted, I could do, an exploded view of a house, the walls and the blueprints and all this sort of stuff. I could do a very intricate portrait of a person. I could do cartoons and all kinds of things. Then when I lost my eyesight, when I was trying to draw, it was like a square and then maybe another square that's half the size of that square. But I would have to concentrate so hard that I would just be sweating. It would be like I've been running a marathon or something. Because the concentration was just so hard, feeling those lines and trying to make it perfect. But the wonderful thing about that was that while I was thinking about trying to draw these lines, I wasn't thinking about everything else. I wasn't thinking about all the stuff that I had lost, but the vision, and I wasn't worried about the future. I wasn't worried about the classes I was taking in school, or if I was going to be able to finish them, or if I was going to be able to do this or that. I was only thinking about that one brush stroke at that one moment. So it put me in the moment. And as long as I was painting, it kept me in the moment. And I wasn't worried about this other stuff. And the more that I painted, the calmer that I got, and the way that my mental health started to change. And it made it so that, I would spend 6, 8 hours, 12, 14 hours a day painting. And then when I wasn't painting, my brain sort of kept in that moment, it started keeping in that habit a little bit over time, so that when I was going to dinner with my parents, if I was meeting with them, or if I was meeting with friends, I was in the moment with them, and I was able to appreciate that more. And after about 6 or 8 months, I honestly, I thought I was getting sick. I thought I had the flu or something, because I just felt so different. But what it was is the stress had just sort of fell off a little bit. And I actually started to feel a little happy. And it had been so long since I had those sort of positive feelings that I didn't know what it was. I thought I was coming down with something. And it just felt so foreign, so different. But it was just because, I had been focusing on the artwork, and that made my mind shift a little bit. And then, so I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling on. I get really excited about this, but one reason that I get excited is because I love to teach art workshops, and I've taught art workshops to tens of thousands of people. And if they're sighted, I'll put a blindfold on them, and I'll show them the way that I paint by using touch, and the way that I use color, and I'll throw this in there. I know I'm jumping around, but the way I see colors through touch as well, because I can't actually visually see color.
Right.
So I'll braille the tubes. So I'll write on the tubes using braille, what color they are. So I know when I grab the tube, at least where I'm starting with. But I also change the way the paint feels. So I'll mix different mediums in with the color to make the colors actually feel different when you touch them. So a medium is just, it's an additive that you can put in a paint that will change the thickness of it, the texture of it. So I can add a medium into a white, like a titanium white, and make it really thick and feel like toothpaste. I can mix a different medium into a black and make it feel runny like oil. So if I'm touching a really thick paint, there's no thought involved. I know it's got to be white. It's really thick. It feels like toothpaste. There's no like, I wonder what this one is. If it's oily feeling, it's got to be black. And then if I want to mix colors, I can actually mix for a change in texture. So if I want a gray between that black and white, I just mix for the texture that's halfway between the two. And I know I have a color that's halfway between the two. So it just gives me something to touch and feel. And the wonderful thing about it is that there's no expense involved. Like, you don't need crazy computers. You don't need crazy anything. You just need some basic techniques that that you can learn. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited about, is that artwork comes from your mind. It comes from your heart. We call it the visual arts, but that is just an old sort of term. Art comes from your mind. It comes from your ideas. It comes from expression and feeling. And who has more to express? Who has more to say than people with disabilities? And that's why you find so many people that have disabilities, a whole broad range of disabilities that are into the arts. And I'll tell you something. The first time that, I gave a talk at the Metropolitan in New York. The first time I went there, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to look up some famous artists that had disabilities, and it'll be a really short list, but I'll be able to mention a few, and that'll be great. What I found out was that so many artists throughout history had disabilities. It was just incredible. And, but a lot of times they tried to hide it. They wouldn't talk about it, because throughout history, people might see a disability as a weakness, which is completely untrue. And that's not the way that we view it anymore. But they would say, oh, I don't want to let people know that I had a hearing loss. I don't want people to know that, this or that. But if you think about it, it is people with disabilities that have the most to say. They're the people that have struggled. They're the people that have overcome. They're the people that have met challenges and not only seen those challenges, but they've come out on top. And those are the people that have stories to tell And all artwork is telling a story. So I apologize again for rambling over. I go on and on. I get really excited. But
it's wonderful what you're saying, John. And I have to ask you something that comes to my mind, and is there are many people who have been told you have no talent when it comes to drawing, painting, or anything like that. You will never be an artist. And then I listen to you, John, and you say, you know what? Anybody can try, and maybe they'll be better than they think they will be. Because sometimes perception is what makes the problem here. Because people say to you all day long, you are bad at this, you are bad, and you believe it. So my question to you, John, is if anyone can become an artist, which I would like your opinion on, or not necessarily the word is artist, they can paint, why not? What should be the trying to find a word like what can be the expectations of someone who has been told for 30 years you have no ability of doing that, but still that person wants to try? What is your opinion, John?
Oh my goodness, I think you should try art. Art is all about you, really. I mean, the only person that you should be trying to impress is yourself. You know, you're just, it's a battle with yourself. I'm always trying to help other artists out because I know some artists will see it as a competition. They're like, oh my goodness, well, if this other person's in a gallery, then that means less sales for me or whatever, which I think is ridiculous. Art is all about your own personal battles. It's about trying to improve yourself. And I know that when I started, nobody thought that I would be, a successful visual artist, including myself, but I just had to paint. I was just, I was obsessed with it, but galleries wouldn't, they wouldn't show my artwork or anything. So I didn't even go the gallery route at first. Like for me, nobody believed in me. Nobody thought that it would work, but I was working with nonprofits and charities. I was teaching workshops. I was helping to do fundraising with them. And then museums started seeing what I was doing. And they said, hey, can you come and teach workshops at our museum? Because we want to be inclusive and we want to have everybody come here and be able to access the art. So then I started working with museums like the Guggenheim and the Met and the DMA and all these different ones. And then galleries started saying hey, maybe there's something to this guy. maybe he can do art. I don't know. But it's funny because it's never been about really, I don't think art should necessarily be about trying to get your word out there. I mean about trying to impress other people. Art is all about trying to push yourself a little bit. I know me, I started painting because it helped me with my depression and it helped me with anger and it helped make my day a better day. And that's literally why I'm painting today. I was painting right before we started this call, and I'll be painting right after we hang up this call. I've got my easel right here. And I'll be painting until about 2 a.m., 3 a.m. tonight. And I'll get up in the morning early and I'll start again. And it's, and it's just because it's a way that it makes my life better, and if something makes you feel better, if something helps your day go better, don't listen to what other people say. But the biggest thing though, the biggest hurdle, I think for people who have a creative bent to them, isn't the outside world. It's the inside. So many people will have a negative voice. They'll try to judge what they're doing all the time and they'll actually hold themselves back. The smartest thing I did, and I'm not that smart of a person, I'll admit, but I did one smart thing in my life. When I first started to paint after losing my eyesight, when I started relearning, I told myself that I'm not allowed to judge anything I did for a year. Anything art related, I was not allowed to judge. So whether it was good or bad, it did not matter. It was just doing the work. And that's a hard habit to break, because the first day I probably would have quit 3 or 4 times, because you're making a line, you think there is no way I'm going to be able to do this drawing. There's no way I'm going to be able to make this. This is horrible. Like, if somebody was to look at this, they would laugh, and you keep telling yourself that. But then you remind yourself, oh yeah, I'm not allowed to judge it. So it doesn't matter. It's not about whether it's good or bad. It's just about improving. It's just about making it a little bit better. And then when you get done with the painting, it doesn't matter if the painting is good, if it's pretty, if it's not pretty, if it tells a story, if it doesn't tell a story. You're just done with it. You move on to the next one. And it becomes about the process. It, becomes about the journey. And I had a friend. He passed away. He was 93 years old when he passed away. He was much older than me, but he started painting when he was 13 years old, and he painted every day. And he said that every day he painted, he learned something new. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to have in your life, where you can do it every day, and it's new and it's different, and you learn something new about yourself. You learn something new about it. What a wonderful thing to have in your life. So, I think with art, it doesn't have to be painting. I see people who, they do sculpture, they do photography, they do all kinds of different things. And it doesn't even have to be, a typical kind of art. You can put art in your life for anything. I see people that, who are foodies or they're collectors, and they're able to find art in their life and able to appreciate and able to push themselves. And, I think it's important to find that thing, that takes you out of yourself a little bit. And if I may, yes, one of the most important things is to fail. You need to fail. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you're not failing, you're probably not trying enough new things. But you need to be okay with failing. Failing is such an important creative step. You need to fail a lot, and you need to be okay with it. and it's funny, like with my painting, it's constant failure. I'm always making mistakes. I'll make a line, it's not right. Okay, then I'll make another line, it's not right. Or on an entire painting, the painting won't work out. I'll try a technique. Like I remember the first time I tried to make skin tones, and they came out where the painting actually worked for some miraculous reason, but the colors were wrong because I read an article about how to mix skin tones, and I followed it, and everything came out pink. And nobody's really pink unless maybe so it was just these pink weird colors. So then I had to go and relearn how to make different skin tones. And but that failure was amazing because I was able to push my knowledge. I'm always learning how to draw. I'm always working on different ways to draw and make drawing better. And I mixed this one paint once where it was this wonderful line. It would dry really fast. But unfortunately, after about 2 or 3 days, it would seep into the canvas and it would leave a visible mark, but I couldn't touch and feel it anymore. So to me, it was useless. It might as well not have been there. And I thought, oh my goodness, what a terrible failure. But then about 5 years from that, I was working on a painting and I needed lines that would be there for, while I needed them, but then would go away after a day or two. So that I could do this wash over it, which is a technique, it's liquid sort of paint. But if you have a raised line, that raised line will act like a dam and it'll keep the wash from happening. So I needed a line that I could touch and feel, and then I needed for it to go away. And then I remembered that horrible mistake that I had. And I thought, oh, now that big mistake is a success. I don't know. Failure, I think, is an important part of the creative process, and we've got to give ourselves license to be able to go out and try new things and fall on our face and, and be okay with it.
That's a great point, John. That's the kind of passion that I love to hear from people who really are doing what they want to do in life. And that's super important. And John, I have a very, very little question, but for me it's big. How do you draw a straight line not seen?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a hard thing for a sighted person as well sometimes. But one of the things about art, I think, that is that it doesn't have to be perfect your first go around. So if you make a line, yeah, and so for me, I'm touching the line. If you're a sighted artist, you would look at the line. Right. But for me, I take in information through touch. So I feel the line and I think, this line is drooping down towards the end of it. So you just make another line, but you use that one line to help correct it. So it's constantly making mistakes is constantly having failure, but not letting the failure drag you down, but using it to push you forward a little bit. So they've done x-rays of Monet paintings, and I love Monet and I love the Impressionists, and they've done x-rays of all these famous painters, all these masters of art. But it's so interesting. If you look at the x-ray, their sketches are crazy. It looks like a 4-year-old with a crayon did them. There's just lines going all over the place. It's just a mess, and it's just, if you were to go from the sketch, you would think there is no way this painting would ever turn out. But it's because they would take all the little mistakes and they would refine it and refine it. So the way that I make a straight line is by drawing a crooked line. And then by drawing maybe a line that's just a little bit straighter, until finally I get a line that feels right to me. And the other lines I'll wipe out if I need to. Sometimes I'll leave them, But I use paint these days where it'll make a film over the top where I can touch and feel it. But then if I decide I don't want that line, within a certain amount of time I can wipe that line out and it'll go away. But if I leave it too long, then it's a hard line that's never coming off.
And John, this question is for all those who are thinking, okay, becoming an artist sounds wonderful, but let's talk about how do you become financially independent?
That is a hard thing. That's funny. So every year, thousands and thousands of students are in the visual arts departments in colleges and universities all around the world, and they're cited, and they leave college and they're like, oh my goodness, how in the world do I make a living as a visual artist?
Right.
So it's a pickle. One thing that I mean, for me, I when I first started, I did my first shows and I was working with museums and stuff while I was still in college, and I had such a backwards way of actually making it as a visual artist because I didn't really think that I would make my career as a visual artist. It was something that I needed to do, I loved to do, but I thought that what I would be is a professor, and that's what I wanted. I love teaching. I love sharing, with people and seeing them get the spark in their spirit, and them wanting to make their own voice be heard. And that's where I thought it would be. But I started working with nonprofits and I started working with charities, and then that led to the museums, and that led to the galleries. I think what is taught in the visual arts schools right now is that you have to go a gallery route, which means that you get out of school, you get a body of work together, and then you start putting it out to galleries, saying, hey, I want to show in your gallery. The problem with that is that galleries only want to show artists that have a track record, that can show that they sell, because a gallery is a business, and if they don't sell your artwork, they're not making any money. And even though they love art, they love art, their art's their passion, they still need to pay their light bill. They still got to pay the rent on the gallery and all that. So they want art that they think will sell. So it's really hard. So how in the world does an artist who doesn't have a list of galleries under their belt get into a gallery when that's what they require? One of the wonderful ways, I think, is by actually going and working with museums. And I would you would think, well, how in the world will you get into a museum if a gallery won't show your stuff? Well, a lot of museums, actually most museums now, they want to be more hands-on, and they offer workshops. They offer all these different opportunities so that you can maybe paint live. A lot of artists don't want to paint live, but if you don't mind painting live, sometimes you can go and paint live at a museum, and they'll have different nights where they just want artists around creating art, and they want that atmosphere. If you enjoy working with children, there might be workshops you can teach working with children. But the interesting thing is that if you're in there and you're teaching this workshop, or you're available for them, museums tend to remember that. And then when they have a need for something else, they'll give you a call. They'll send you an email. They're like, hey, can you come by and help us with this? And then it just starts to grow. And museums will talk to each other, and they'll say, hey, do you know anybody that can do this or that? And then they'll share your name. And then suddenly on your resume, you've got, I've worked with this museum, and I've worked with this museum. which looks really nice on a resume. And then the next time you go to a gallery and you say, hey, I would like to show, they'll see your resume and it's not blank anymore. It's got these museums on it. Another thing is working with nonprofits and charities. And this is really my preferred way to work. I do work with galleries, and I usually have a gallery show going somewhere all the time, but I do a lot of work with nonprofits and charities and raising money for them and doing galas and different things. And the reason is, and this is sort of a sneak peek behind the curtain, all a gallery does for you is they try to put your name out there. And the hope is that the gallery has a list of collectors that will come in and hopefully they'll purchase your artwork. But all a gallery does is put your art on exhibit and put your name out there. Well, if you go to work for a nonprofit or a charity and they're having a gala, they're having, some sort of fundraising event, and you say, I want to go there. I'll help you guys. I'll paint live, and then we can auction off the painting. They're putting your name out there, and they're putting your name out in front of people who, honestly, and I didn't know this when I started. I wish I could say I was so smart that I figured it out. But a lot of the people who support charities and they support nonprofits, they have expendable income, which means they're also the people that are purchasing art. So they're putting your name right in front of the people that have the money to be able to purchase art. And here's the wonderful thing. If I work with a gallery and let's say we didn't sell as much art as we wanted to, that's like, oh, that's too bad. But it's just sort of a business transaction. There's no, it's like, oh, well, that's too bad. That's terrible. If I work with a nonprofit and we don't sell as much art as we'd like to, it's still a win. We still had a great time. We still raised awareness. We still were there. We met amazing people. We were able to push the needle a little bit, disability awareness a little bit more. So with that, it's a win-win. It doesn't matter if the art sells or not. It was still a great time. So, and I would encourage people, if you're an artist, and you are wondering about some of this stuff, reach out to me. Send me an email. I will try to help you any way that I can. Particularly if you're an artist with a disability. I mean, gosh, if we don't stick together, who will, So, and my email is just Bramblit@gmail.com. It's just my last name. And that's that way on everything. So if you prefer like Facebook or Instagram or whatever, it's just my last name. It's just Bramblit, at Instagram, Bramblit on Twitter, Bramblit on Facebook. But reach out, and if I can help you, I certainly will.
John, we are coming to the end of the interview, but I have three little questions to end this wonderful interview because we're touching on many things which I love, and our listeners too. One is, how did you meet your wife?
Oh, I met my wife in college. She had just graduated, and it was taking me a bit longer, because of the vision loss and all that. And she worked in the newspaper. So they were having they call it a dead party. It's like the last newspaper of the semester. Like they're not going to put out any more. So they had the dead party. It's like the end of it. We're done. Yay. And I was invited by a mutual friend of ours to actually meet someone else. And the party was at my future wife's apartment. And I was there, and there was this woman walking around the apartment, and she was so friendly and so nice. And it was just this wonderful sort of feeling to be around that person. I thought, if I had a friend like that, that would say a lot of good things about me. A lot of people would think a lot more of me if I had friends like that. So we got to know each other, and about 2 weeks later, we started dating, and we started, and we've dated exclusively ever since then. And she's just the most incredible person. And I was painting about 14 or 16 hours a day at that time. And she had just started painting, and she had these canvases that were stapled to her walls. And they were these highly textural paintings. And, and it's funny because she only painted for about, she was a photography major. So she only painted for about 4 to 6 months of her life. That's really it was just her foray into painting. And I happened to meet her during that time. And she had these amazing textured paintings. And so it was just, I don't know, it was just this amazing thing. She's just incredible. She still is.
How nice to hear that, John. Now, my two last questions. One is a very important one for our listeners. You were telling me before the amount of lessons you have learned through your journey of losing your sight, adapting, adjusting, and living a full life. What would be some of the lessons, the best ones, the biggest ones you have learned since you lost your sight?
The biggest one I kind of touched on earlier, but it certainly bears repeating. And that's failure, being able to fail. And it's funny. I've had the opportunity to meet some people that I really admire and, that are at the top of their careers. And whenever I get to meet someone like that, like I've met actors like Jeff Bridges and some other people and sports stars that are, at the top of their career and musicians that are at the top of their career. And whenever I meet somebody like that, I ask them, what is your secret for success? And I swear to my goodness, invariably what they come back with is that you've got to be okay with failing. You've got to be able to fall flat. And it's funny, like you look into the careers of these people and it's mostly failure. It's mostly like for every success they have just a string of failures or, and sometimes it's not even documented that well, or you see you meet a musician who is at the world chart leading, they're incredible. They're number one in right then. And then you go back and you say, oh yeah, they had like 15 years of just abject nothing, just abject failure, right. before they suddenly were an overnight success. And so I think, being able to risk and being able to, put yourself out there a little bit and being okay with it and saying, I didn't get it that time. Next time. It's kind of like Edison with a light bulb. He tried 2,000 times to come up with a better light bulb. And then finally he did it. It's just, you got to keep trying. Every time you fail, it's not really a failure if you learn something from it. It's like in science, you do a test, even if a test comes back, you're trying to invent something, you're trying to discover something and you come back and you didn't discover it. At least you learn a way not to do it. You won't try that again.
Right. And John, I have to ask, can you tell us some of the people you have met? I mean, Jeff Bridges is a very good actor. Who else?
Oh, I've met, gosh, let me think. I'm horrible. Tony Hawk, Jeff Bridges, lots of musicians. And, I'm trying to think. I did a plane for, a mural on a 737 and for like oh gosh, I can't even think. I swear my brain is just, I've gone blank. I'm so horrible. But lots and lots of musicians. I can't even think. But I know, and this is going to sound, I don't know how this is going to sound, but the people that I remember most though are actually people with disabilities that I've met that have overcome and they've conquered. And, like Eric Weinheimer, he's the first blind person to climb Everest. And he's such a nice guy. And Mandy Harvey, she's a deaf musician. And I just love her. She is so sweet and so talented. And she, was on America's Got Talent. And, but yeah, there's tons of musicians, DJs, all these different people. And I'm horrible with names. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think. Oh my word. It's funny. Yeah. It's funny. I remember the people with disabilities better than I remember the people without.
It's okay. I'm just curious. But John, last but not least, tell us about your book.
Oh yeah. I wrote a book called Shouting in the Dark. And one of the things whenever I was losing my eyesight was hearing stories from people who, not even just had a disability, but they faced a challenge in their life and they were able to get through it. And just hearing about their journey, I thought, one of these days I just want to be a part of the dialogue and I want to write this down and I want to, if one person read that and they, it helped them, at least know that, hey, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like I don't see the light. I can't imagine there being a light at the end of the tunnel, but this person says there is. I just wanted to be a part of the dialogue. So I did that. And I loved, that was a great thing. And I want to work on a new book, but what I would really love to do one day is come to Colombia. I've never been there and I want to come and I want to work on some workshops, and I want to meet people and paint.
That would be wonderful. John, please, in talking about that, how can people find your work?
If you go on the internet, I'm at Bramblit.com, and my last name is just Bramblitt. So my internet is my website is Bramblit.com, and on Facebook I'm just Bramblit, and on Instagram I'm Bramblit, and on Twitter I'm Bramblit. It makes it really easy for me to remember. It's always the same thing. And if you forget that, if you type in blind painter on the internet, then I'll pop up.
Certainly you'll pop up, as you have for so many people, and it's been a wonderful pleasure to have you on the show, John.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. Thank you so much.
John, is not only about the talent that you bring to the table, but also you have like a certain charm to it that you say, this person is successful and he loves his life and he has worked a lot to get where you are at this point. But you also acknowledge what has been tough as well, and you are able to be honest about it, which I think is super important. I love honesty all the way, my friend.
Thank you so much.
So, John, thank you for what you do, for how you represent our community worldwide. That's super important. Someday we'll meet in person, because I have to say, for you and for our listeners, I have in Texas 2 wonderful friends. I'm going to say hi right now to Julie and to Joetta. They live in San Antonio, which I suppose is not so far away from Dallas, I guess. I don't know.
No, it's about 4 or 5 hours, I think, is all.
Okay, that's a good rate. So that's something that is going to happen, my friend. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, remember to smile and follow that example of people like John Bramblitt. And remember always that if you want to be on the show, like John and so many other people have been through the years, you only have to email me at lovevisionbureau@gmail.com. You can follow me right now. Oh, you can follow me on Instagram now. I'm like John. I'm on Instagram. Oh, I'm not painting, at least not at this point. But I'm on Instagram, so you can follow me at Low Vision Bureau, and on Twitter at Low Vision Bureau, and on Facebook at Low Vision Bureau. And it's a privilege to be doing this show, to be honest with you. Thank you, John, again. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much, and you have an open invitation to my studio anytime. Anytime.
I'll be there, my friend. I'll be there. Good night, everybody.